Welcome back. Today we are building deployment pipelines in Microsoft Fabric. Yeah, real pipelines, not the kind that you accidentally break on Friday morning to prevent all of their Friday night deployments. But as if you work with those pipelines too, I guess. But in this video, I will walk you through how to create simple but real deployment pipeline in Fabric, and we are going to use the open source dataset available from the Czech Technical University, and we will wire up that pipeline end to end. And along the way, I'll show you how connections work, why you should treat them as environment scope controlled by library variables, and basically, one more thing I want to mention, that previously in my videos I said that we are going to enable the Git integration, but unfortunately it doesn't really work with the Fabric trial, but that will be the topic of the next video. So if you want, keep an eye open for the next one. But enough is enough, so let's jump into the demo right away. And that's what I have at the moment. It's basically a Fabric. I have my trial activated and only 58 days left. That was done yesterday. And as I said, this is a database that we are going to use. So I'm just going to stick to the IMDb database from the CDU relation dataset repository. I will link this thing in the description if you would want to play yourself. So in Fabric, what you can do is you first of all need to create the workspace. We kind of did it already, but if you don't remember, you can click create a workspace, name this workspace however you like, and for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to stick to dev and QA. And in advanced, you can double check that you have selected the trial version of the licensing mode. That will allow you to use pretty much all of the features that you want. So we are going to create two of those, dev, and we will quickly create a second one, the QA. Once again, selecting or double checking that the trial is selected. And with those two workspaces, we finally can get the ball rolling pretty much. Initially, as you can see, everything is empty and you have nothing. So the first thing that you would want to create is a data storage, where the data will be injected into. If you remember my previous video about the medallion architecture, that would be our bronze layer. So you click on the new item, and here we can type lake house, and that would be our storage. In order for the name, let's call it LH bronze to follow the pattern. And usually with Fabric, as well as with any other development related activity, you want to stick to a certain naming convention, and underscores, I like them very much because you can double click and select everything. So we are going to create the lake house first, and when it is ready, it will be opened immediately, but you don't need anything, so it is empty at the moment, no tables, no files. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to create the data pipeline that will copy data from the raw source to our bronze layer. To do that, we can search for a pipeline in new item, select pipeline, and it will ask us for a name. Once again, let's follow the naming convention and call it something like PL raw to gold rush, because we are going basically bypass everything, and for this pipeline I wanted to show only the data loading, and you can start with a guidance over here. Use a wizard assistant to copy data, or use some of the sample data sets that are provided by Microsoft, but instead we are going to use the copy data activity, and it will immediately create a new copy data. For the source, it is asking to create a new connection. And as I said, initially I wanted to use a relational dataset repository and IMDb, and everything worked fine while I was preparing for this video. But during the demo gods decided to no, and the connection was not working anymore for some reason. So instead, I created a new SQL database on a SQL server in my trial subscription of Azure and use the sample data from here. So let's use this one. And to connect to it, I copied the server name. We are going to create a new connection. You can click on the browse all, and in here, when it loads, we can use a sample data. And if you be one of those sample sources of data that was mentioned before, and you can use those. Or what I want to do is to create a new connection to Azure SQL database. The server name would be my server name, and then the database. One thing that you needed to do is on security of this server to enable access to Azure resources or enable access from Azure resources. It is a security flaw, but it is something that needs to be done for the demo purposes. And let's call it Azure Dev. Then authentication. I created a user to connect to this server, and when it is done, we have created a new connection. There are some tables available. Let's pick one at random. Let's say address. And we can preview the data, so the connection is there. Well, you already guessed as much from the table being available, but instead of loading the whole table, I want to use a query and copy only top 10 rows. Okay, with it, hopefully query will work. And it does. And now we need to set up what would be the destination. Destination, we are going to create a new connection, and this connection would be for the lakehouse. And this connection, it will allow access to all of the lakehouse resources pretty much in this Fabric tenant. For the tables, we are going to create a new one because there is nothing yet. And let's copy that stuff into the address table. The last thing that we can check, well, first of all, what will happen with the table if we're going to append or overwrite or upsert. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to run this pipeline many times. The last thing is mapping. By default, it will try to do whatever it can, or you can input the schema and modify it as you see fit. But once again, for me, it doesn't really matter for the purposes of this demo. We can leave it as is. So when it loads, maybe I shouldn't have clicked it because it takes time. Oh, so let's skip it. So we can save it and we can run this pipeline. When it is executed, once again, it will take some time. Okay, it is finished, and we can see that the data is copied. We can go to our Lakehouse Bronze, and if we refresh the tables, we will see that there is a single table address with some data, so those top 10 rows from the source. Yay! Good for us. What is happening behind the scenes, or what I want to do next? Well, first of all, show you that we have those rows. But the interesting bit is that we now have, if we go to settings over here and manage connections and gateways, we will see two connections created. One of them is Azure Dev Fabric user. So this is a connection to Azure that we created together. And another one is Lakehouse Fabric user, the one that is used to connect to all the lakehouses. I'm going to create a new connection now for the Azure QA. And the idea is that this connection is supposed to be used for the QA data source. Technically speaking, you might have many different databases, one for dev, one for QA, one for production, and so on. and it is good to separate them. Okay, now that we created our QA connection, it's time to check what we have in our QA workspace. And surprisingly, nothing. It is empty. Ah, well, that's what we expected to see. Now it's time to create a deployment pipeline. Yeah, the whole topic of this video. If we go to the dev workspace, we will see that there is a button to create a deployment pipeline over here. Or alternatively, we can click on those dots, or depending on the size of your screen, it can be in this list. We can create deployment pipeline like this. So let's create a new pipeline and call it never roll back, because we are never going to roll back this. And by default, it suggests us the holy trinity of dev, test, and production. We don't have production at the moment, so only 2 stages will be enough for this demo. Then we need to assign workspaces to each of them. So development is dev and test is QA. And with that, immediately it will try to compare those two environments, those two workspaces, and see that in QA we have nothing, in dev we have 2 items of a lakehouse and pipeline, so we can select everything and deploy. The deployment itself will not take so long, and soon we will see the results. Okay, it is successfully deployed, and we can go to QA workspace and see that we have the lakehouse and road to gold rush pipeline. The lakehouse, surprisingly or good enough, it doesn't have any data, it's just the definition of it. So we will need to run the pipeline to actually get the data first, which is good. You don't want to mix data between dev and QA environments. But in terms of the pipeline itself, you can see that we have a pipeline exactly as it was in our dev environment. So it is still using the dev source, which is not good. But the good thing is that destination is Lakehouse Bronze in the QA workspace. How do I know it? Well, the answer is simple. If we go and try to change it to use the dev Lakehouse, which is possible, so the location is dev. If we select this one, then it will add dev in brackets. So it will highlight that the lakehouse is not in the same workspace. So I'm not going to save this pipeline and leave it as is. I'm not even going to run it. But now we need to change that the workspace is using the dev connection, which is not good. In order to do that, we are going to use the library variables. Yay! So let's create a new item, which is a library variable. And once again, we need to call it some way. And let's call it Linim's library, because it is big one and it should have many variables in that, right? We will create a new variable and we will call it connection ID. Of type string. The value for this variable we are going to find in those connections. Remember how I showed you how to get to this one? And if we go to the settings of each of those connections, there would be a connection ID that I'm going to copy and paste it into this default value set. But then I will create a new value set and I will call it QA to indicate that this value set is supposed to be used in a QA environment and it is pointing or using variables for the QA workspace. And in here, I'm going to copy this connection ID. With that, we are going to save this thing, and we have 2 different values. Now, if we go back to the pipeline, which is in dev, not in QA, sorry. It's very helpful that now you have color-coded tabs at the top, because you can quickly know that you are working on the correct environment and not production by mistake. And now, instead of using that hard-icked from the drop-down connection ID, we are going to use a dynamic content. The dynamic content blade is very helpful, as you can see, and you can put expressions, functions, and system variables over here. And what it actually wants is to have the connection ID. That's why we copied it. You might have here. But first, you need to click on the empty space over here and assign the library variable to this pipeline. So we are going to get the connection ID. It will be available under this name, and it doesn't really matter for me which is this one. So once again, go to the dynamic content, and we can click on that expand library variables and use this connection ID. Then it removes the database because it doesn't know what databases are available, but we can refresh it. It will ask what value are we going to use. Let's use the default one. And it will load the databases. We have master database and the fabric test IU database. And with that, we can preview the data. Once again, asking for the connection ID. With it, we will see the same data that we had before. All right, that means everything works fine. We can save it and go back to the never rollback deployment pipeline yet again. It will refresh the state between those two stages and see that in test environment, we actually have some changes pending. There is a new variable library in the source, and also there are some changes to the pipeline. So we want to deploy those too, but we can deploy everything. It doesn't really matter. It wouldn't change a thing. Let's do the deployment. And when it is finished, we will be able to see that in QA workspace, we have everything yet again, which is exactly what we want to do. And if we go to the pipeline in QA, so it is blue over here, and go into the source, it's not updated yet. Let's refresh it. Hard refresh always works. If we go to the source of this, we will see that it is actually using the pipeline variable. And if we will preview the data, it will ask for the value of the parameter, but it will be able to connect. There is one small problem, that it is actually still using the dev connection. Why do I say so? Well, because if we go to the 11th library variable in QA, we will see that the active data value set is still set to the default one, and we need to change it to QA1. Set this as active, save it. So it is something that you need to do manually, but luckily only once. And that is basically to indicate that this library variable set is using that connection. Let's quickly run another test and do the change in dev. So let's add a new variable, test, of type boolean, true. It is a very valid test. When we save it and run the deployment pipeline, as you can see here in dev, we still have the default value set as active. And if we go to the deployment pipeline, never roll back, and there would be a change to this library variable. We will do the deployment. To QA. And it is done. So let's go to QA library variable. Now refresh it, hard refresh it. And we can see that we got a new variable with a new values, but the active value set is still on QA. So you don't need to do that after each deployment. Big win. Cool. It is finally done. So in this quick demo, I showed you that it is possible to change data pipelines between different environments and make it in a controlled way with different connections. And yeah, you can automate a lot. Hope you liked it. Please like, subscribe to my channel, and see you soon.